Hello, I'm Mike Fisher, theater writer, critic, and dramaturg.
I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company, and this is Theater Forward, a twice-monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insight into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 78 of Theater Forward. And in this episode, we are going to be talking more about our Wisconsin Wrights New Play Festival and the ways in which it has evolved over the years. And so for this conversation, we are joined by Karen Miller, Forward's artistic associate, who has honestly been the key person behind all of our new work logistics for many years. Welcome, Karen.
Hey, Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
I thought I would just start with a little bit of a synopsis of how Forward became involved with this Wisconsin Wrights program and how we got to where we are, because really what we want to talk about is what the choices we've made have been over the years as we've endeavored to improve this program so that it better supports our company, better supports the artists who are selected to participate in it, and frankly, better supports the artists who just submit for it. So Wisconsin Wrights was started before Forward existed. It was a program of the Department of Continuing Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And when that program was getting going, they partnered with a couple of professional companies, the Madison Repertory Theater here in Madison, which does not exist anymore, Milwaukee Chamber Theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, et cetera, to do subsequent readings of the plays that were picked for the festival. And when the festival was happening at the UW, it was a full week residency for the selected writers. They would stay at this gorgeous historic home called Eden Fred, which is no longer an artist's retreat and residency, but it was for a while. And there was this sort of really robust experience for the selected playwrights. And the program, it was for writers who are based in Wisconsin, and for full-length unproduced plays to come and have a rehearsal process with professional actors, directors, dramaturgs, stage managers, develop that material further, culminate in a public reading. So when Forward started and the Madison Repertory Theater was no longer here, Wisconsin Wrights sort of came to us at Forward and said, hey, would you be interested in producing that sort of secondary reading of one of the scripts in this year's festival? And it was happening every other year. And we said, absolutely, because we've been looking for a way to do more support of new work, and especially of Wisconsin playwrights. For those who don't know, like, our mission statement is about supporting Wisconsin theater professionals. And even in our early days, we felt like we were able to do a lot to support actors and directors and designers and crew, but to support playwrights is also an important part of being a professional home for Wisconsin professional theater artists. So this was a great way for us to do that. And we did that along with producing workshops of some other plays that we were interested in over our first several seasons. And Karen, you could probably jump in on what year it was, but there was a point at which the university said, we think we're not going to continue this program.
2014.
Ooh, that was a long time ago now. Okay. And so we, at that point, committed to taking the program over and making it an official new play festival, sort of fully under our umbrella. We do still partner with Milwaukee Chamber Theater, who does secondary readings of one of the plays each time. But ever since we took it over, we've had to think deeply about the structure of how we solicit scripts, how we review them, what the process is for artists that submit, how we choose the finalists, and then what sort of resources we provide to the selected playwrights. And each of those aspects has evolved over time. So I thought maybe we would kind of break it down a little bit and start at the very beginning of the process for submitting playwrights. And Karen, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what the conditions for submitting in terms of requirements and fees and all of that were when we began, because that was an inherited model from the university, and maybe describe that a little bit.
Sure. Well, when we began, and it's always been a festival aimed at Wisconsin playwrights. ideally residents of Wisconsin, but I think it was a little more loosely interpreted when it first began. And originally there was a submission fee for writers who submitted their scripts. And the requirements were a little bit different. I think it was a little bit stricter as far as, length and subject matter and things like that. But, we realized that we could be a little bit looser, because what we really want to do is support the playwrights. It's not necessarily about programming, 3 different plays, 3 plays that have this specific length or specific subject. It's about supporting new works and new playwrights and Wisconsin playwrights. And, they always were read by, readers. We've bumped up and I think really enriched the way that they get read and judged along the way, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, as well. But so that's sort of the program that we inherited.
Yeah. And I know that because we've talked about this often, Karen, you and I and the rest of the Forward staff, when we inherited this program, one of the things that was really, I thought, special about Wisconsin Wrights, the way it was run by the university, is that, yes, there was a submission fee and it was $30, but everybody who submitted was guaranteed written feedback from multiple professional theater readers. And the university would sort of coordinate a huge pool of folks who were reading these scripts and providing written feedback, and all of the money and then some that was submitted for the writers' fees was going straight to pay those readers for their time.
Absolutely.
And so, when we took the program over, we certainly didn't have the money, because this was a huge expansion of what we were doing in terms of new work. So we didn't have the money to pay 3 readers for every script, and we get dozens and dozens of scripts submitted. So we just kept the fee that had been there from the beginning. But really, out of the gate, we felt a little squeamish, and we got some pushback from playwrights saying, "Hey, you shouldn't be charging us to submit." And we've been really that's a persuasive argument, and one that we agree with in principle. And so that's been one of our big changes over the several festivals. They were every other year since 2014. First thing we did is we said, look, we put language on there, said, if this is a hardship, if the fee is a hardship, let us know and we'll waive it, so that we could not incur the full expense of paying for all of those readers, but at least, offer that lifeline. And there'd always be a few people that would take us up on it. In the meantime, we were also trying to up what we were paying those readers, because they were getting $10 to read a full length script and provide written feedback on it. So, but then in the last couple of cycles, we've completely removed any submission fee, and we've bumped up what we pay to the readers, and just build that in. Yeah.
The last, well, this is the 3rd festival in a row that we've increased the stipend that the readers get. I think we still want to probably bump it up at least one more time, because one thing I will say about the readers, we use people who are all across the state, a lot of whom are in an academic setting, a lot of whom are playwriting or writing instructors, professional directors, actors, and other playwrights. And the feedback that they provide is really pretty incredible. There was one play actually this year that was submitted, and it was an historical play. And, I get the very fun task of assigning the plays to the readers and sort of putting that whole huge puzzle together. And there was a reader that I knew was sort of in the stable who really specialized in historical plays. So I sent the script, I assigned it to him as one of the plays he read. He wrote 5 pages of feedback and, really delving into the historical aspects. It turned out that this was a particular historical figure he knew a lot about. And so he was able to correct some things, ask follow-up questions, and the playwright who, that play was not chosen for the festival, but that playwright wrote back to me after receiving the feedback and just said, this is the most incredible, invaluable feedback, so much more than I ever could have hoped for. Please give my thanks to the reader. And I've actually received that feedback from a number of playwrights just saying, I'm so grateful. Even if I didn't get into the festival, I'm grateful for the quality and the depth of the feedback that I've gotten. And the fact that now we provide that without even charging a submission fee, it just makes me really proud and really happy.
Can we talk a little bit, and then this will wind up teeing up Mike for some of the ways that he's been involved in this festival. Karen, can you just describe, under our current structure, sort of how we go from here's all of the plays that have been submitted to getting to our finalists? Like,
Sure.
Sort of how does that get sent out, and what are the steps in that process?
So, we still have maintained that every play is read by 3 different readers. So, we put out a call for submission, usually I think at the end of the summer, if it's Wisconsin Wrights year. And then the deadline for submission is usually the end of October. And we tell people this is coming up in June. So they've got a long window in which to either start a play or to start revising a play that they've already got in the works and then submit it. Once they are all in, during the course of submissions, I start soliciting readership. And there are some folks who have been reading plays for Wisconsin Wrights since it began in 2007, and who have a long history with it. And others, are new each year. One thing that I always make sure is that, there aren't any conflicts. So we'll ask the playwrights when they submit, has this been read before? Has it gotten a public reading? We won't do any plays that have gotten actual productions, but some might have gotten, they had some friends together to read it, or they might have sent it to someone in the theater community to read it. I always get that list when they apply so that when I start assigning it to readers, no one's seeing it where they'll immediately know who the playwright is or that they've read it before. So all of those submissions come in. I start figuring out who's going to read what. If it's, say, a playwright from Milwaukee, I try to make sure that there's a couple of non-Milwaukee readers on it, just in case it's someone they know. I want to make sure that they get, insights, because Madison writers, they tend to have a certain flavor. I feel like Milwaukee ones do. So you get someone from northern Wisconsin or someone from Spring Green or whatever, Mineral Point. And then each of the readers provides, they score it on a list of 15 things, ranging from plot development to character development to, does this add something to the world? Is it easy to follow? Even all the way to grammar, or spelling. And then they also give it, do they recommend it highly? So in other words, is this play ready to go? Do they recommend it? We'd love to see this in the festival, but it needs some work. Or it's not quite ready, it needs more work. So we get that feedback, the numerical score, the score of whether or not it's recommended or not. And then all of those things go into the magical Excel spreadsheet. They get averaged, they get considered. And usually from there, we come up with, how many? We usually have about 15
to 20. And to be clear, playwrights' names are not, no one knows the playwrights' names for this whole part of the process.
I should have said that immediately. I'm the only one who knows who the playwrights are, and I am not one of the readers because of that. So it's all absolutely anonymous. And I also do always ask the readers, if you start to read a play and you think you recognize it, please let me know. And a couple of times I have had someone go, actually, I know who wrote this. And then I'm like, great, I'll assign it to somebody else. So it's entirely anonymous. There's no way to know who wrote it. So once we get through the first round of readers, then we usually have about 15 or 16 plays. They then go to a second round of readers, and that's usually anywhere from 3 to 5 readers. And it usually gets read by 2 to 3 more people. From there, we usually get it down to about 5 scripts that we then start really drilling down. And then we pick our 3 or 2 or 4, however many we pick that year. We're always guaranteed to pick at least 2.
Yeah. And it's really only when we get down to that final 5 or 6 that have really risen to the top. That's the only point at which we go, okay, who wrote these?
Right.
Because under those circumstances, things like, have we produced your work before in Wisconsin Wrights might be a factor, or,
Absolutely.
looking to make sure that we're really, spotlighting and supporting writers from different regions of the state, different backgrounds. But it's really only amongst that top sort of final tier that we got to through what you so beautifully call the art math of the Excel spreadsheet, that we do that. And I know that I usually am reading all of the 15 or 16 finalists in that second round. And it's always, I'm always so impressed at the folks who work as our first round readers, the amount of time and effort that they put into that.
Oh my goodness, we couldn't do it without those readers, and
Yeah.
I never failed. Every single Wisconsin Wrights, I never failed to be impressed by how much time and consideration they put in, and how much good and specific feedback that they will give to playwrights. It's, and again, the fact that whether you're in the festival or not, you get that feedback. It's just so incredibly useful and a rare opportunity. I mean, I feel like a lot of playwrights, you might have a group of friends read it, but usually friends aren't going to be completely honest when they're giving you feedback about your play. But these readers are, but they're also incredibly constructive and supportive, because everyone that reads this they work in theater. And so they know that it takes a lot of courage to put a script out there and to send it in. And so we respect that courage so much.
Yeah, Mike, you've been a reader. You talk about it.
Well, I was just going to say, in response to what Karen said, what I love about this process is the way in which it is systematizing or institutionalizing making sure that somebody beyond your group of friends reads these plays. We're so far behind the literary world, where you have had institutionalized guilds and colonies and structures allowing for this kind of reading and for readings of poetry or short fiction forever. And it's really only for those who are diehards, it's only really to me, maybe in the last quarter century and at an accelerating rate during that time, that play readings have become a thing where you can regularly count on a good audience to come hear this. And it's because people are hungry for this new work. And that's why we're getting this great feedback. People want to help their colleagues in this profession and to provide a venue for that. And God bless this particular, yes, sure, I'm biased, but this particular, festival for, deliberately, Jen, as you said, if there's a playwright we have produced before, we're more likely not to pick that person in the final bit. We're more likely, all else being equal, to try and seek out the person who has not been produced by us before. So we are lifting up those voices, and there are so many good ones. Like Jen, I read that entire group of 15 or 16 that's moving toward the final round, and I'm blown away every time by just the quality of what we're getting. And it's like it's unwrapping presents, at holiday time, to be able to just see these things. You have no idea what you're going to get. I don't love them all, but I love something in just about every single one. And to think that I'm in a position, or that we're in a position, to maybe at least give feedback. Whether the playwrights decide to take it or not is up to them. But to be able to be in a position to offer that feels like such a privilege, and goes to the heart of what we were talking about a couple podcasts back. We need to be encouraging people in this new work. We are losing companies in Milwaukee, which I can speak to better than Madison, that privileged and focused on new work. Alchemist Theater, gone. Cooperative Performance Milwaukee is just about to close forever after 9 seasons. Quasimodo not doing as much work as they used to. So for the companies that are in a better, more better position to support this kind of work, like Forward, like Milwaukee Chamber, like Milwaukee Rep, so important. And you see in the audience for all 3 of those companies in particular, in terms of how many people come out, people want to be part of this. It's exciting to be part of something new, right? So this gives them a chance to do it, and gives me a chance as a reader to do it. And very different from other festivals I read for, because we're really trying to promote those unknown voices, and that makes it even more visceral and closer to the roots of what it is to be involved in this business, I think. Sorry, long answer, but this is such an exciting thing.
I love your enthusiasm. I mean, that just makes me happy.
Well, so one of the other things that we've really tried to work on improving, I mentioned earlier that when the university first started this program, it came with a week-long residency for those writers. Now, when we took the program over, as I said, I mean, that in and of itself was a massive expansion of the resources that we were putting into new play development, in terms of lots more readings, lots more, actors to hire, directors, stage managers, dramaturgs, needing space to do it in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we began doing it, here, we were working on sort of like an 11-hour staged reading rehearsal plan, which was enough time for the playwright to kind of come to a couple rehearsals, hear how the piece was sounding, maybe give a little bit of feedback to the, get a little bit of feedback from their dramaturg and director and actors, maybe make a few changes, but then, 11 hours goes real fast, especially when that includes the time for the reading itself, which would be very straightforward staged reading, minimalistic tech. And for years, whenever someone would say to me, "Hey, what would you like to see forward, expanding or doing differently or growing over the next few years?" I know that at the sort of top of my list has been doing more to support new work. And so last summer, our fabulous Julie Swenson, our managing director, asked me that question again. And I was like, I wish we could expand Wisconsin Wrights. And at that point, she and I just, let's just do it. So we're now doing it on a 29-hour rehearsal staged reading code. And a code's the wrong word, but just agreement with the union, nearly tripling the amount of time that the playwrights have in the room with the actors, with the director. We've got full-time dramaturgs on site, and really hoping to see how this goes this year. If it really allows the playwrights to do a lot more rewrites during the week, to really have a lot more opportunity to fine-tune their scripts. I'm also hoping it will bring the writers more into community with each other, because it's a very lonely art form being a playwright sometimes, and to be able to be around all these other playwrights during that week. All 4 of these will be rehearsing in sort of staggered days over the week leading up to our 4-night festival. So that's been a really big change. Honestly, we will see if that's a sustainable change in the future. Part of the reason we felt we could take it on this year is because there has been some government support related to the pandemic. And so the idea of being able to put that directly into hiring more people for more hours felt like a really good mission-driven use of some of that funding. We'll see where things are in a couple of years if we can continue to make that work. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what it feels like to do this festival in a manner that's significantly more in depth than we have done so far.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about we've talked a lot about the process. Can we talk a little bit about the actual plays that we're going to be doing?
We sure can.
It's pretty exciting to me.
It is. Well, and just to clarify, so with Wisconsin Wrights, what we have said from the time we took it over is that it's a 3-night festival. People can submit, and that from submissions, we have said all along, we will pick 2 or 3 scripts, because we always wanted to reserve 1 slot if there was a play we were working on with a Wisconsin writer. So for example, this year we actually have a writer in residence, Quan Berry, who wrote The Medellinian Debate, the show we ran earlier this season. And part of her residency with us this year is that we are going to be developing another of her new plays as part of Wisconsin Wrights. So we'll talk about that play in a moment, but you've heard us referring to the fact that this is a 4-play festival. And that's because we basically have a bonus reading at the end. We have two plays that were selected from this submission process. We have Amy Quan Berry's play that's part of her residency. And then we will be doing the first staged reading workshop of Artemisia, which is the play we have commissioned as our world premiere Wisconsin script for next season. That piece also needs a development process. And so it felt really a no-brainer to kind of fold that in
and Jen,
to this process.
Who is that play by?
Lauren Gunderson. Yeah. So right off the bat, we've got Lauren Gunderson and Amy Quan Berry here for this week, which is super fantastic. Amy's play is called Lifers. And it's sort of futuristic office. I don't even know what else to say about it, except that it's amazing.
You can't say too much without giving it away, but it sort of involves a mysterious high-tech company and people who aren't quite sure what they're actually working on, and it sort of unfolds over the course of the play.
Yeah, but let's describe the other 2 plays, the ones who did go through this full selection process. Karen, you want to do the first one?
Sure. Well, the festival starts on a Wednesday night, May 18th. And that one begins with the play Viragos, a play with found text. And that's by Catherine E. Norman, who's a playwright from right here in Madison. And it's a play about, it's an historical play. And it's about Mary Ward, who had a school. And how do you describe it? It's a group of young English women, and they are basically rehearsing a play at the Institute, which was Mary Ward's school for girls that was founded in France. And this was in the 1600s. And they're sort of exploring the boundaries of art, of science, of love, of politics. And, you know, this is all underneath sort of the shadow of an institution that, you know, isn't maybe thrilled with young women exploring some of those ideas. And a lot of the text is taken from actual letters of the time that still exist to this day that give us insight into Mary Ward's work. It's really fascinating. It's being directed by Jess Lanyas. And it has 7 fabulous local actors, 6 young women, and another young woman. I'll say Liz is young. And it's just a really, it's a fascinating play. And don't let the historical part, you know, make you think it's boring, because it is not. It is just, it's meaty and it's alive and it's fun.
Yeah.
No, it's the history is, I mean, think sort of, you know, obviously it's sui generis, it's its own thing, but think Lauren Gunderson's The Revolutionists meets Carol Churchill's A Light Shining in Buckinghamshire. And you get some idea of the way in which history is being played with.
I like that.
Really, really fun piece. And then I think that to have the festival bookended by this and yet another awesome Lauren Gunderson homage to another kick-ass woman who didn't get her props in her time. I mean, they will reverberate with each other. It's lovely to have them framing and enveloping the festival in their protective arms, those 2 shows. So,
oh, that's lovely. That's a lovely way of putting it. I agree.
Indeed. Mike, would you like to talk about the second piece in our festival, which is Civil Union by Amy Hansen, who's based
another
in Racine?
Another one where it's so hard to talk about it without giving too much away. But think of it as, I'll use another couple of analogies. Think of it as Nick Payne's Constellations meets Harold Pinter's Betrayal, set around a wedding, and the tensions that exist in I'm giving nothing away with this. Every wedding is full of stress, right? For the people who are going through it, and not just for the people who are being married, but for the people who are their parents. And, you know, and so maybe I can triangulate those 2 playwrights with Steve Martin in one of his movies, right? So you get all that going on together. But some really great, what I loved about this one, some of the dialogue is so rich and so, it just rings true in terms of the way in which the stressors that are existing in a person's life come out, and also beautifully sort of spooled out. So you sort of see it just gradually, you're being fed as the audience, you're being fed a little bit at a time as you're trying to unravel this mystery behind the mystery of this day of a civil union. I've said absolutely nothing about specifics, I hope, but that gives you a sense of what you're in for. It's really fun.
That is terrific.
And that one will be directed by Dana Pelabon, who is a brilliant local artist here in Madison. Amy Kwan Berry's play, Lifers, is going to be directed by Mary McDonald Kerr, well known to Milwaukee theater fans as well as Forward fans. And then, of course, we'll have Lauren Gunderson's Artemisia in the final night of the festival, and I'll be workshopping that one with her, working with wonderful dramaturgs, working with artists from all over southern Wisconsin. It's always a really fun event for us, but it's going to be quite different this year because we've got 4 shows. They're all being rehearsed in the same place. And with this expansion of hours to let us really go deep. Before we kind of start winding up, I thought we should also just talk briefly about the other part of this that's evolved. We've talked about how we've tried to grow, how we support the people who submit, how we're trying to grow by supporting more hours of work to support the playwrights. But then, of course, the other thing is then the feedback process for the people who are in the festival. It being forward, it'll surprise no one. We have a talkback after each reading, but working with the playwrights to make sure that the feedback they get from that audience that attends, and these are people who love new play development, is helpful to them, is constructive and useful. Karen, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the ways we started to work on that?
Sure. Well, one of the things, and I think we only just started this maybe with the last live Wisconsin Wrights, because of course the most recent Wisconsin Wrights was virtual, is that we have asked each of the playwrights, what are, say, 2 or 3 things in particular that you want audience feedback on? Is there, let's say, a character that you're not sure if they're landing the way that you want to? Is the ending tying up ends in the way that you want them to be tied up? And so we get that from each of the playwrights, and then we print those out onto, pieces of paper, and we put those on the seats in the theater before the house opens, so that when you come in to the theater and you take your seat for one of these plays, I urge you to pick up that piece of paper and read what things the playwright is really interested in finding out from you as a member of the audience. Did this land? Did this work? Was this clear? And then when it comes time for the talkback, you can actually let the playwright know. I mean, you as an audience member at Wisconsin Wrights, you are also sort of working. You're not just watching, you're working, because, the playwright is really going to be counting on you to let them know, how is this play working? Did it say what they hoped it said? Did you hear what they wanted to say? And so that's one of the ways that we do it. And I know that the last time we did that, the talkbacks were incredible, and the playwrights were just over the moon with they got exactly what they needed to hear to go forward with that.
Then they're sort of getting a collective response. It's not just asking one person, because you might get very different answers from all the people in the audience on a particular question. But, if you've got 30, 50, 70 people all answering a question, you'll probably start to get a sense of a general way that your play is being perceived. And then you can then...
And if you can think about it as an audience member, if you can think about those things as you're watching the play, I think that's so much more helpful than at talkback time. The playwright says, well, what about this character? And then you have to sort of rewind it. This way you can be sort of mulling that over as you watch.
Mm-hmm. And we've talked a ton about talkbacks in previous episodes of this podcast. And the talkbacks for Wisconsin Wrights are such a different animal than the ones we do after, a regular production, because those ones after a regular production are really about kind of serving the audience and what do you want to know? And how can we help you see behind the scenes of how we put this all together? But a talkback after a new play reading is really specifically about how do we support the playwright in the development process of this play? And so making sure that we do provide a little bit more structure to that talkback experience so that it is focused on the things that the playwright will find useful, because it can be easy for feedback to be tossed out that maybe isn't what the playwright is looking to work on. And they're allowed to choose what they want to work on because it's their piece of art.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we've been, really learning from our experiences and trying to evolve that part of the process.
Yeah, I think the talkback at Wisconsin Wrights is a little different because oftentimes more questions are asked of the audience by the playwright than vice versa, which is kind of fun.
I mean, totally their piece of art. That is 100% correct. And yet, and this is what I love about theater, every piece of art that you see on a stage anywhere is the product of a collaboration between a lot of people. And for those of you listening who are never going to get a chance in life to be a New York producer, which is like 99.99999% of you, this is your chance to be a genuine collaborator in the creation of a piece of art made in and for Wisconsin. I mean, it doesn't get more exciting than that. And that goes to the heart of what theater is. It's like you're in the room during a rehearsal process, participating in building this beautiful thing. I mean, my God, who wouldn't want to take advantage of that kind of opportunity? Seriously.
Well, that is definitely going to be our final note for this conversation, because that is spot on, Mike Fisher. So I'm going to say that is all for this episode of Theater Forward, a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Karen, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Jen Ophoff-Gray.
And I'm Mike Fisher. Our podcast is produced by Scott Hayden, to whom I, on this Zoom call, am sending my thanks right now for making all of this happen. Courtesy of Scott, you can follow us or share your thoughts on Facebook and Twitter at Theater Forward. As always, theater is spelled E-R.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred platform. Be sure to leave a review or comment. We love hearing from you. And we're just so grateful to have you listening. We'll be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.